Johnny Depp's journey through the labyrinth of fame has long fascinated fans and critics alike. A figure known not only for his eclectic film roles but also for his complex personal life, Depp has remained an enigmatic figure in Hollywood. Yet beneath the charismatic exterior and the critically acclaimed performances lies a man who has been profoundly shaped and scarred by the spotlight. In a recent revelation made through a documentary, Depp opened up about the crushing weight of early fame, admitting that it consumed him in ways he could never have anticipated. His confession is not merely a moment of vulnerability, it is a window into the turbulent experiences of a young man thrust into a world where identity, truth, and humanity often dissolve under the harsh glow of celebrity. Depp's story began with humble roots in Owensboro, Kentucky, far removed from the lavish world he would come to inhabit. Born into a working-class family and raised amidst frequent relocations, Depp's childhood was marked by instability. The chaos of his early home life served as both a crucible and an escape hatch. Music became his first refuge, a medium through which he sought solace. But life had other plans. At the age of 20, a chance meeting introduced him to the world of acting, and not long after, he landed a breakout role in the television series 21 Jump Street. This role catapulted him into instant fame, transforming the relatively unknown musician into a teen idol overnight. But for Depp, this was the beginning of an internal crisis that would follow him for decades. Fame, as Depp now articulates in his documentary, is not the glamorous phenomenon it is often portrayed to be. For him, it was a beast, one that devoured his sense of self. Being idolized at such a young age, he found himself placed into a mold that didn't reflect who he truly was. Crowds screamed his name, tabloids published his every move, and strangers felt they owned pieces of his life. As he reveals, the admiration quickly turned suffocating. The industry wanted him to play the part of the charming heartthrob, but Depp resisted. He wanted to be an artist, not a commodity. And therein began the tug-of-war between who he was and who the world expected him to be. With each new role, Depp tried to carve a path away from the persona he had unwittingly acquired. Films like Edward Scissorhands, Benny and June, and Dead Man reflected his desire to disappear into characters that were often odd, fragile, or misunderstood, perhaps mirroring his own inner state. These roles weren't simply professional choices. They were acts of rebellion and self-preservation. As he immersed himself in characters that lived on society's margins, Depp felt a strange liberation. But outside the frame, the pressure mounted. Directors, producers, and even fans wanted to define him, box him in, and shape his narrative. It was a reality that constantly clashed with his need for artistic integrity and emotional authenticity. In his confessions, Depp describes the emotional toll this duplicity took on him. He was adored, yes, but he was also deeply alone. The more famous he became, the more isolated he felt. Friends became scarce, privacy a thing of the past. Every gesture was scrutinized, every misstep magnified. In a particularly raw moment in the documentary, he admits to feeling as though he was eaten alive by the industry that once celebrated him. The spotlight, he says, doesn't just illuminate, it blinds. It distorts perceptions and expectations to the point where you no longer recognize yourself. Depp's experiences echo those of many child and teenage stars who have spoken about the alienation that often accompanies early fame. But in Depp's case, the alienation was compounded by an ever-intensifying spotlight and a growing dissonance between his public image and private reality. Despite his internal turmoil, Depp's acting career flourished. With each passing decade, he earned critical acclaim, box office success, and a devoted fan base. His portrayal of Captain Jack Sparrow in Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean franchise turned him into a global icon. But while audiences laughed and cheered, Depp was unraveling behind the scenes. The very role that brought him immense success also trapped him further within the confines of his public persona. His personal life began making headlines: relationships, legal troubles, substance abuse, and conflicts with the media. Depp acknowledges that fame not only magnified his flaws, but also created an echo chamber that made real healing difficult. The line between Johnny Depp the actor and Johnny Depp the person became so blurred that he struggled to understand where one ended and the other began. Substance abuse became one of the ways Depp coped with his growing disillusionment. He describes how fame left a void that he tried to fill with alcohol and drugs. They were his anesthetics, tools to numb the pain of existence in a world that demanded constant performance. But the relief was temporary. In fact, he says, it only deepened the chasm between his public success and private despair. His relationships suffered, his trust in people eroded, and the world began to see only fragments of a man who was once considered one of the most promising talents of his generation. The documentary also touches upon the betrayal Depp felt from those closest to him. In his words, fame attracted not only fans but also opportunists. People entered his life with hidden agendas, driven by the allure of proximity to celebrity rather than genuine connection. He learned, often too late, that trust was a fragile commodity in Hollywood. This constant betrayal, he says, hardened him, turning vulnerability into something dangerous. As a result, he became more guarded, more withdrawn, and less willing to open up. Fame, which should have brought connection, instead fostered alienation. It created a fortress around him, one he helped build but no longer knew how to tear down. Still, through all the pain and turmoil, Depp never abandoned his artistic instincts. Acting remained his compass, even when everything else was falling apart. He speaks with reverence about the few roles that allowed him to reconnect with his humanity, characters who reminded him of his purpose. Collaborations with directors like Tim Burton gave him a creative sanctuary, a place where he could be himself without the burdens of stardom. These films were not just projects, they were lifelines. Yet even these oases could not fully shield him from the storm of fame that raged around him. What makes Depp's confession so poignant is its timing. After years of legal battles, media scrutiny, and public speculation, many assumed he had retreated into bitterness. But what emerges instead is a man who has taken time to reflect on his journey, not with anger, but with clarity. He acknowledges his mistakes, the roles he played in his own undoing, and the lessons he's learned. It's a rare moment of self-awareness in an industry that often punishes vulnerability. In opening up about his past, Depp offers a powerful message. Fame is not a reward, but a test. And surviving it requires more than talent. It demands resilience, self-knowledge, and the courage to confront one's demons. As he speaks candidly in the documentary, Depp emphasizes the need to protect young actors from the machinery that nearly broke him. He calls for a more compassionate industry, one that nurtures rather than exploits. He urges parents, agents, and studios to recognize the humanity of those they thrust into the limelight. These are not just stars, he says. They are people, often young, fragile, and unequipped to handle the intensity of public adoration and scrutiny. Depp hopes that by sharing his story, he can prevent others from being devoured in the same way he was. The confession also serves as a turning point in Depp's life. No longer defined by past controversies, he seems ready to reclaim his narrative. He speaks of healing, of rebuilding, and of finding peace. It's a journey that has taken decades, but one that now feels possible. With time, introspection, and a growing willingness to be vulnerable, Depp is finally making peace with his past. And while the scars remain, they no longer define him. Instead, they serve as reminders of what he has endured and what he has overcome. In the end, Johnny Depp's story is not just about fame. It is about identity, survival, and redemption. It is about a man who rose too fast, fell too hard, and somehow found the strength to rise again. His confession is more than a headline. It is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure. And for those who have followed his career, admired his performances, or simply wondered about the man behind the characters, it offers something rare, the truth. Raw, unfiltered, and deeply moving. Johnny Depp may have been devoured by fame at a young age, but he was not destroyed by it. His journey, though littered with pain, scandal, and personal downfall, is equally marked by perseverance, artistic rebellion, and an unwavering commitment to truth. In an industry where image often supersedes substance, where vulnerability is rarely rewarded, Depp's survival is in itself an act of quiet defiance. The voice he now shares with the world, steadier, wiser, and tempered by reflection, speaks, not only for himself but for countless others who have been similarly consumed by the weight of fame. It is a voice that emerges not from triumph, but from scars. Scars earned through decades of battling public perception, media scrutiny, and internal chaos. When Depp speaks today, there is a groundedness that comes not from resolution, but from acceptance. He doesn't pretend to have all the answers. He doesn't hide from the mistakes he's made or the shadows he's walked through. Instead, he invites others to see the humanity behind the myth, the flawed man behind the beloved characters. And in doing so, he performs a kind of emotional alchemy, transforming pain into purpose, confusion into clarity. His willingness to revisit the darkest chapters of his life and publicly acknowledge their impact isn't just an act of confession, it is an offering. It is an attempt to connect on a human level in a world that too often dehumanizes its idols. The strength of Depp's message lies in its honesty. There's no self-pity in his words, only a yearning to make sense of what he endured and to help others avoid the same fate. He understands the machinery of fame intimately, how it exalts and destroys in equal measure. He recognizes how the spotlight, though intoxicating, can isolate and erode. He acknowledges the price of living in a world where your image becomes a product and your soul is slowly negotiated away. By sharing his experience, he places a mirror before the entertainment industry and the culture at large, urging a collective reckoning with how we consume, praise, and ultimately discard the people we claim to admire. Perhaps most remarkably, Depp has chosen transparency not when his star is brightest, but when it has been bruised and dimmed by years of controversy and backlash. That choice reflects a profound inner shift, from the need to be understood to the desire to understand himself. And for someone who once seemed to disappear behind 1,000 characters, this unveiling of the man behind the mask feels like a revolution. For a man once consumed by the illusions of celebrity, this act of honesty may well be his most powerful role yet. Not scripted, not rehearsed, but real.